Well, good morning, everyone. I'm just seeing whether this week, can I get the system to work properly without any issues? Well, first and foremost, welcome to Solid Ground on this, actually here in Auckland, quite a lovely winter's morning. It's not raining, but we've had the rain overnight, so there's actually a freshness to it. Solid Ground, of course, is where we talk the issues of the day, political, ethical, you name it. We talk a wide range of issues from a particularly conservative, traditional, I would say, a solid ground. There you go, you've got the pun. We talk about the issues of the day from a firm foundation of actually good values, good ethics, good faith. And so if you want to be part of the conversation this morning, particularly jump onto the Family First Facebook page. That's where your comments feed into me. So I can see the questions you're asking or comments you're making. I can share them on screen and obviously can have a chat and respond to you all there. Importantly, there'll be a number of you who are watching this across other platforms, be that on LinkedIn. You could be on my own social media pages such as Facebook. You could be watching this on YouTube. Very much welcome. Lovely to have you here. But at the same time, if you do want to comment, if you want to shout out a good morning or tell me how everything is going, then you have to be on the Family First Facebook page. At this exact moment in time, we haven't quite been able to set up the system so that we can get it all, if you will, all ticking over. So please do. That would be just amazing to have you as part of this conversation this morning. I'm actually just checking one of the settings now because I'm wanting to see if we can get these comments to come across. We're going to try and make them come across. Time will tell. If you're saying good morning, then good morning to you. It's not wanting to find the Facebook pages this morning. It can see it, but it won't send them across, which is a bit of a bummer. I might be able to do it manually. So anyway, as I say, solid ground is also a very bad pun, if you will, to do with, well, I don't know if it's a bad pun, but obviously grabbing your coffee and everything in the morning. So, please, grab whatever you particularly like and join me for the chat here. Hey, look, a few things to talk about this morning. I suppose the big one is obviously the American presidential debate. Now, that obviously doesn't relate at one level to New Zealand, but it's what everybody is talking about and what everyone's asking me about. So I thought I'd show you a few clips. And then why don't we have a little bit of a chat around what we're seeing. We'll start with everybody's favourite, because I think we can all agree he didn't have a particularly good day. So it won't be a moment. Oh, it looks like the comments are good morning, Chris. Lovely to see you here. Good morning. Anyway, the US presidential debate. Who do you think won it? Put it in your comments. Anyway, here's a couple of quick clips.
And since I've changed the law, what's happened? I've changed it in a way that now you're in a situation where there are 40% fewer people coming across the border illegally. That's better than when he left office. And I'm going to continue to move until we get the total ban on the total initiative relative to what we're going to do with more border patrol and more asylum officers.
President Trump?
I really don't know what he said at the end of that sentence. I don't think he knows what he said either. Look.
At one level, you've got to cry. And at another level, you've got to laugh. I mean, it's just, by the way, I'm going to focus on both candidates, but I thought I'd do them one at a time. Look, I've got a range of thoughts around the whole Biden situation. Look, in no particular order, it's bordering on cruel. I was on something called Straight Talk last night. It was another one of our channels through Family First. It's a panel discussion, but we were talking about this last night. In fact, everybody's talking about it. Good morning, Flora. And Daniel tells me it's for Trump. Anyway, I've got distracted. It means that the social connection is slowly working. I feel sorry for Biden at one level, actually. And it's because I don't think he's compos mentis enough to fully appreciate what's going on. It's why I think I used the word cruel a bit earlier. To me, there's a whole pile of people in behind him who are ultimately pulling the strings. I don't think he's completely a puppet. probably make it a bit of a nuance here. I still think he's got some of his faculties, but it's just cruel actually to see this happening. But to the extent that he's still willing to go on, he should take some blame. It's clear that his wife, other advisors are very, very keen for him to remain in the game. And, it's not unreasonable from their end. Don't agree with it, by the way, but it's not unreasonable because they want the power. They want the influence. It's great that they can roll him out and he's the face, and they can be, if you will, behind the cameras, behind the curtains, basically making a series of decisions that they want. And as you've seen, particularly under the Biden presidency, it's got more and more left, if you can even say left. It's got more and more woke, more and more disingenuous, more and more dangerous. It's, and I say that dangerous, I mean, you go and try living on the southern border or in some of those, what do they call them, sanctuary cities that the far left and the Democrats set up, where they got rid of all the police and then they wondered why there's now anarchy. It's just nuts, the drug problem. So all of this, in fact, I came across some stuff yesterday that his health secretary, it's this trans woman admiral, so it's a guy who's now trans, who was pushing the WPATH, so it's the transgender people, the people who write the guidelines, pushing them to change them to basically remove any age limits associated with young people beginning down the whole trans path. I mean, the guy's sick. Let's put it out there. He might be an admiral in the Coast Guard or the Medical Corps or something. I'm not joking. He's not a fighting admiral, but I mean, it's just disgraceful. So this is all the Biden administration. And so the debate was absolutely terrible. He was faulting, as you can see. It wasn't even the worst. I held off actually putting the worst out. I think if you go on to Mick Blog, so Bob McCroskey, my colleague, he does often a morning, a little bit like this, but a piece to camera where he goes through and he has more of the coverage. But Biden, it was sad to see. This is the leader of the free world who clearly has dementia and clearly is in a terrible, terrible state. But I would add one other thing on this is, of course, the media in the last few days seem to be shocked and then they seem to be in a terrible, terrible panic. So why they're shocked is they have been gaslighting the rest of us for the last, 2, 3, 4 years? Anyone with an ounce of common sense and an ability, if you will, to be able to step back from one's political prejudices could see that Biden was in cognitive decline. That something was not right. But if you were following the media, certainly in America, but it's flowed into our mainstream media here. Better stress that actually it's the mainstream media. Gaslit New Zealanders and Americans and others for daring to question whether he had issues. And by gaslighting, that means basically they blame you for actually pointing out the truth. So many of us, many of you watching, and not all of you watching, have been saying there's something seriously wrong with this man. He needs help, actually. So it's coming not from a malicious space. It's coming because we think he needs help. But the media and others, no, he's fine. You're all just bigots and you're racists and all, the usual. I don't know why they'd call you a racist with Biden, but that's the media for you. All sorts of epitaphs were being thrown around. You're far-righters, you're extremists, you're Trumpers, you name it. There's all of this abuse coming from media, say gaslighting. And then it seemed to be the shock of their life, particularly for the CNN anchors. Bob and I were talking about this yesterday with some of the others in the team. The CNN anchors looked shocked at what they were seeing. And in fact, the media is so complicit in their own lies that they believe it. There's that famous quote, actually, from Lawrence of Arabia, which I'm going to hash, but it's where one of the generals says to Lawrence, one of the politicians, a man who tells lies, and I've forgotten that part, a man who tells lies, he said, a man who tells half lies has forgotten where he's placed the truth. And I think, unfortunately, that's what's happened with a lot of the mainstream media with Biden. They've lied to themselves and to us for so long that they've forgotten what the truth is. But now they can't hide from it. It's just absolutely appalling. And they're in a massive, massive panic because they realise that actually, for all the faults of Biden, it's very likely that Trump will win. And they're in absolute blind panic. So let's talk about what's going to happen. But I thought first we better show the other side because he, as in Trump's, not without blame either. Then I'll take some of your comments. So this is dear old Donald Trump.
I want absolutely clean air, and we had it. We had H2O. We had the best numbers ever, and we were using all forms of energy, all forms, everything. And yet, during my 4 years, I had the best environmental numbers ever. And my top environmental people gave me that statistic just before I walked on the stage, actually.
So you might wonder why I'm sharing that one. Well, I thought Trump's approach, obviously very different to Biden. He's not lost his faculties. I mean, Biden, by and large, has. There's been little elements of Trump, but look, to be honest, there are times, gosh, if you've watched enough of these, there's the occasional time that I stumble, but I don't think I've got, officially cognitive decline. No, I put that up because that's just so Trump. Everything is amazing and perfect. So in this case, the environmental record for America under him was perfect. Look, I don't know if it was or not. I suspect it will be very much a debating point in what you look at. But if you watch the debate like I did, very Trump, very egotistical, I would suggest to you. Everything was amazing. The economy was the best ever. The environment was the most amazing. Foreign affairs, the best ever. So a man with an enormous ego, enormous confidence. And I think, to be fair on some in media, whether it's lying or very much embellishing, that's very, very Trump. So at the end of the day, I think we had two very strange characters for different reasons on the topics. And one who's clearly lost his mind, and the other who, he is very egotistical. So before I sort of, before I cough. Oh, by the way, I'm sorry I'm looking so casual this morning. I went for a run, and let's just say I went further than I was anticipating and lost track of time. So sorry to the Family First team that, yes, I've sort of come running back in with a few minutes to spare. Hence, I'm dressed like this. So yes, apologies for that. Anyway, a few of your comments. I thought I'd better run these. Now, where's my little buttons? So we've got Chris very kindly saying good morning. There we go. Daniel's saying that he thinks Trump will win. Actually, that's where I am at the moment too. For what it's worth, I'll explain why. Flora says good morning. Lovely to have you on, Flora. Nick says if that's the best two people America can put forward, they aren't the superpower. Look, I agree. It's a deep worry, but I think a lot of this is ultimately money. Maybe we'll touch on that and why. I think, again, Nancy nails it. It's Trump by default. And I suppose if I was to put my own words around it, and excuse me, Nancy, it's that ultimately, none of them are great. They've got, significant failings, and yet Trump could almost go to sleep from here. Liz says no one won. Yeah, I think that's actually true. It's why I sort of felt more sorry from the end of it. Though interesting, I'd suggest to you, CNN ran the debate this early, and the Biden camp in particular accepted it, because there's never been a debate this early. It enables, or to give time where people want to replace Biden. So this is from Rosie, and that's a good segue for me, because whether he can step aside or not is a debating point. Look, of course he could. Right, tomorrow he just says, I'm standing down. But this is fraught with political difficulties for particularly the Democrats. And to be fair, some risks for the Trump or Republican campaign. We all remember, I remember certainly on the centre-right, great celebrations when the leader of Labour, so at the time it was Andrew Little, stood down. And personally, I quite like Andrew. Don't think he's a bad guy. Got on with him well, but from a purely partisan point of view, when a party loses its leader, that's seen as a good thing. It weakens the other side. But of course, after Andrew, we had a certain J.R. Dern who turned up, and we all know how that worked out, with most of us being locked in our homes and so forth. So the Republicans have to be careful, if you will, of wanting Biden to go. You're better off having a wounded gazelle than actually putting in someone new who's feisty and actually could take the fight to Trump. Although that's not clear who that would be. And importantly, and look, I'm happy to be corrected if there's other American political followers. But there's what they call the primaries in the US, and that's where you've probably heard about the primaries. So this is where candidates for the Republican ticket or the Democrat ticket go state by state to collect votes from their supporters to become the candidate. And so Biden and Trump have been doing this for weeks and months, collecting up these votes. So Biden has hundreds of these votes, or large numbers of these votes for the primary. And what tends to happen is they all then go, because once the votes are done and they are given to a candidate, the people with those votes must vote in that way. So when they all go to the Democratic convention in a few weeks, I'll use the word hundreds, but I could be wrong, but hundreds of people are bound to vote for Joe Biden. So if he's no longer the candidate, it becomes just open, and now just an open vote. And I can tell you what, political leaders don't like open. They like managed democracy. They like everything to be clean and tidy and smooth. That's why a lot of political conferences here in New Zealand are beyond boring. And I'm sorry to say that to any national people watching. There's sometimes good discussions, but when was the last time you had a proper vote on anything? Because it's all managed. It's all managed in the background, and that's what the Democrats, as with the Republicans, what the Democrats want, a nice managed campaign. So if Biden steps aside tomorrow, then you're going to have a whole pile of presumptive candidates, from Gavin Newsom, who's overseen basically the destruction of California into a third world country, Michelle Obama, who's, well, a figurehead, and a whole range of other people. Look, you'll have the lunatics like AOC and that putting their hands up, and then there'll be fights on the floor. I mean, not physical fights, though wouldn't that be fascinating? There'll be fights on the floor of the Democratic convention. There'll be split votes, and that doesn't look good moving into an election. It's easy prey, for want of a better phrase, for the Republicans to show that the other side is broken. So there's no easy way out of this. Biden says he's not leaving. As I said, those people behind him who enjoy the influence, they're going to keep backing in Barack Obama's. So it's all a bit of a mess over there. And so I've forgotten who said it. Might have been Nancy. Yeah, it was Nancy. I'll put hers up again. I think she is right. Trump by default. He's got some good news, by the way, overnight. The Supreme Court's come out and said a lot of the charges against him to do with the last election, particularly January 6th, can't stand. So you'll know, is it Jack Smith? He's up for a whole lot of charges for inciting violence and riots and insurrections and a whole lot of behaviour. Well, the Supreme Court's come out overnight, New Zealand time, 6-3, to say that actually a lot of the charges against him can't stand. That long and short, acts that he was doing as president, so talking to his vice president, for example, those conversations can't be used as evidence. So a lot of the charges, not all, but a lot of the charges will fall. And so regardless of what you think, again, of Trump, of the charges and what's happening, this is another bad blow, or not quite a body blow, but quite a bad blow for the Democrats, because a lot of the legal weaponization that they've tried, again, I wrote about it the other day on my Substack, where they're using the law to try and attack their political opponents is falling apart. Though I did have to laugh, one of the justices, she's the liberal, I've forgotten her name now, isn't that typical? But one of the really liberal judges was saying, well, oh my God, if presidents are allowed to do whatever they want in their official capacity, a president could tell the special forces to go and kill someone they don't like, kill an American they don't like, and they could get away with it. Well, I had to laugh for two reasons, because of course the last president who did that was Barack Obama, who basically dropped a 400-pound bomb on an American citizen in Syria, knowingly, by the way. I'm sure that justice at the Supreme Court, this liberal justice, wouldn't want to be hauling Obama to court. But as others have pointed out, there are still some outer rails of what presidents can and can't do. Extrajudicial killings are not part of it, whereas talking to your VP. So look, it's been a bad week for the Democrats. Look, I would counsel for what it's worth. There's still much more water to go under the bridge. There's much more that could happen. You never know at what tangent dear old Trump will go on or off. And at the same time, as you say, if Biden did choose to step aside, if he did choose to step aside or gets forced to step aside, it's possible that they'll all coalesce around a new candidate and it'll give real impetus and energy, or it could all fall to pieces. But I'm certainly detecting politically here at home and overseas, a lot of people are preparing now for a Trump presidency. So Charmaine notes this. I don't know if you can read it all, but she says Trump was a good president during his term, generally more Christian than Biden. He certainly, one's Christianity I always think is a bit fraud. Look, I think Biden's sold himself out on so many issues, certainly in the ethical front. Bob's done a good, Bob McCoskey has done a really good Mick blog yesterday. Look it up. Or if one of the Family First teams on, they can throw it into the chat. But he was going through the abortion stuff that both Biden and Trump were talking about. Neither covers himself in glory. I mean, Biden's completely off his rocker. Seems to think that, I'm not even going to go into it. Biden was just completely off his rocker on the topic. Trump was more accurate. Trump pointing out, as I've tried to do around Roe versus Wade, that actually returning the decision of abortion back to the states is the way it was meant to be. And actually there's some great footage of Biden supporting that many years ago, as in, these are decisions for the state. It's why Roe versus Wade was a terrible piece of law. It's also why media in New Zealand and weak politicians were so very keen to just slam anyone, myself included, on the Roe versus Wade thing, because they know the arguments to support it were so weak. So weak. Speaking of that, I know it's American politics, but this is another one that's come up. We talked a couple of weeks ago with the Supreme Court in America, and this is for those of you who are pro-life, so you can understand what's truly happening. So a couple of weeks ago, there was a story that the Supreme Court in America had said that the use of abortion pills was legal, which was true. That's what they came out and said. But, really importantly, the Supreme Court did not say that the pills are okay. It was saying actually the conscience rights of every doctor and nurse is so important, they can decide whether to prescribe it or not. So look, abortion pills, terrible. They kill babies. But, the subtext of the Supreme Court was vitally important, I would suggest to each and every one of us, is that it still protects the conscience rights of doctors. Vitally important, because remember, here in New Zealand during Jacinda's god-awful abortion law, including, by the way, it wasn't just supported by people in Labour, it was also supported by people in National and other parties. So it's just so terrible. They were trying to undermine conscience rights. In other words, force people who, in good conscience, don't want to be part of abortions. They're trying to force them. And the same with euthanasia at the moment, to force doctors and nurses to participate. So that was an earlier case. This one's interesting. So the Supreme Court, because in Idaho, basically they just banned it pretty much outright, except for the usual things, incest and rape. But they've said, actually, there is scope that if someone is in an emergency in the state of Idaho, that an abortion can be given. And that's under the basis of a federal law. So basically, they haven't said that it must happen. They've put it back to the other courts. That's the first thing, is not to panic. Secondly, is always to delve deeper. Because the problem here is those who have been pushing for this are relying on a piece of American law that most of us would understand, that if there is a massive emergency for someone, so if you've been hit by a car, if you have fallen off a ladder and severely hurt yourself, or you've drunk yourself under the bar and choking on your own stupidity, that in America, with its private health system, you are obliged to get that person to hospital, and the hospital is obliged to give emergency care. So the pro-choice or pro-abortion lobby have used that particular piece of law to say, well, actually, in emergencies, women must be given abortion. Well, there's two problems with that, and anyone who's medical will know this, that there's basically no, well, it's not even basic, there is no reason, there's no health reason to abort a baby. You can birth it, okay, so that's the fundamental difference. I know this is a heavy topic in the morning, but so important for people to understand that particularly when the baby's viable, you birth the baby, then you treat the mother. It's as quick, if not quicker, than an abortion. So there's no medical reason for abortions. The second is, and as the pro-lifers in America are pointing out, if this proceeds in the lower courts, the Americans will be arguing, a bit like we used to have in New Zealand, that every abortion's for an emergency reason. In other words, it's not that you've been hit by a car and bleeding out on the road. It'll be, oh, well, the mother's got, had a bad day and just wants the baby gone, or it's got a potential anomaly. In other words, they're going to make up emergency reasons. Rosie's asking the classic question around women who are raped and so forth. Look, Idaho and those other places, again, it's all the lies that the mainstream media spread. Those exceptions continue in just about every state. I haven't read all 50, but those sort of exceptions continue. But actually, I've got an interview coming up in a few days with a very preeminent ethicist based out of the UK, young man, ethicist, medical doctor, who points out that actually it doesn't, a baby dies, and in the case of the woman, life doesn't get any better or easier. Anyway, I just thought I'd point that out. I suppose, a very long way of getting to a point to say, look, just to encourage you to look into the background of these stories, because if you'd read that, and I'll click it back up, if you'd read it, you'd go, oh, wow, that's, I'll put a different one up, because they did briefly leak it. There's clearly issues at the Supreme Court. You go, oh, gosh, it's all allowed. It's all back on. Well, no, it's not. No, it's not. There's subtleties here, but there's also this mischief, I would argue, in play. Hey, look, a couple of other small things just to be aware of, because we'll wrap up soon. One is, this was pointed out to me yesterday, in these literally dying days. This is News Hub, by the way. In the dying days of News Hub, they've decided, one of the key stories is that churches still need to be paying rates on their property, and their angle at the moment is that the police don't pay rates. The police do pay rates on their, they do pay rates on their land, and the likes of churches don't. Well, that's true. But, instead of saying, well, the churches who do amazing charitable work and good work for the community, instead of them having to pay rates, why don't we just allow the police to have an exemption as well? Wouldn't that make sense? So it's clear. It's a simple story at one level, but it just shows you your media bias at play, amongst others, and also a government that's desperate to find ways to get money off the churches. There's inconsistencies in our law. Police stations, for whatever reason, pay rates. Churches do not. But the answer, it appears to be, according to News Hub and a few of the commentators, is that the churches should pay. Whereas someone like myself goes, well, why don't we just allow the police not to pay? And by the way, they never mention all the marae and a whole lot of other places which have enormous exemptions. Okay, most Maori land don't pay rates. There's a whole pile of exceptions. But it seems our friends at News Hub and that are obsessed with the churches. And more locally, I was umming and ahhing whether to play this. So this is one of our lunatics in the Green Party, which is a tautology, but here we go.
And that's really all I have to say, E Te Whānau. I'd just like to close off with some words that they have tried really bloody hard to take out of my mouth and the mouth of many others. From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. Kia ora, E Te Whānau.
Yes, well, I am out about that, because 99.9% of us know and understand, both here and around the world, that particular slogan she's chanting is a call for basically the eradication, the removal of every Jew from the Levant, so from Israel. And this Chloe Swarbrick proudly screaming that. In fact, I'm writing a Substack, an op-ed on this week, and that's why I've chosen to put it out, not because of the Substack, but here is a person who talks a big game about genocide and murder and being kind and nice to everyone, but is very proudly screaming, almost unhinged, to be honest, unhinged screaming for the removal of every Jew from the land in Israel, proudly. That's just, she's nuts. But the other point, which is probably my fundamental point, is this is a person, as in Chloe's, by the way, I believe in her right to say it. You might disagree with that, and you're welcome to. I believe in free speech. So she's still allowed to say it, just as now we're allowed to critique it. But the Greens and Chloe are some of the most vociferous people calling for hate speech legislation. Okay? Never forget that. So she's there saying, they try to stop me saying these words, but I'm going to say them. She's been told by the Jewish community, she's been told by the Human Rights Commission, she's been told by just about everybody how harmful, hateful, and insightful that phrase is. Now, it's well accepted by the pro-Hamas groups. These are the people who raped and murdered over 1,000 Israelis. So they're happy with her, and she's happy with them, arguably. But we're talking a group that is, well, she's been told how harmful and nasty these words are, but she proudly keeps using them. Then in the next breath, wants hate speech legislation to be passed in New Zealand to stop people saying that things she doesn't like. So now that I'm out of Parliament, I can use the word happily and easily, and that's hypocrite. The Greens and others in Labour, actually anyone who calls for hate speech legislation, are just terrible, terrible hypocrites. Because Chloe, like in that little video, will be more than happy, people, to cry for the eradication of an entire race of people, but would love to see you go to prison for 3 years for using the wrong pronouns. So look, be under no illusion with people like this, like the Chloe Strawbucks, the Green Party, the radical left, those who are turning up with their Palestinian flags and their communist flags and all of this. They will do everything they can to stop you having your thoughts, views, and beliefs. And so when they talk about hate speech, when they talk about kindness, when they talk about diversity, when they talk about inclusion, it's only for them. Now, you already know this. But we've got to keep saying it to increase the awareness. And Hayley's got it completely right. They are unhinged. As is Rosie. they are. And it is lunacy because it's just so inconsistent. Okay? I actually believe she has the right to say what she said. I don't agree with it. I think it's absolutely abhorrent. I have many friends in the Jewish community who are very upset by this, and they've told her that this is what we're dealing with. Hey, a couple of quick, if you will, not so much ads, letting you know of other Family First bits and bobs, and then I will show you what I think is a very funny video to end on. So it's not all too heavy. I mentioned earlier. So one is we've got Straight Talk. That's every Monday night. So we've just had that last night. It's live. It's a panel discussion. My colleague Tumby does a weekly something called Pulse Point. She basically summarizes 4 to 5 of the issues of the week. It's really, really good. I've been mentioning that Bob does his Mick blog, and in fact, he messaged somewhere. Here we go. I'll put it under there so you can read it. So he does this most days, where he talks through the issues of the day, which is really, really good. And so he had the Deputy Prime Minister on last week, and then this link you can see. I'm not expecting you to copy it, but just so you know, he's put the link in the comments so that you know where to find the one on Trump and abortion. Selfishly, as I say, I do a 2-hour radio show on RCR every Friday. Amazing array of guests. I've got this week, so that's on RCR. You can listen online. As I say, I do my Substack. Last week's one was talking about how the new funding for drugs is good at one level, but got problems at others. So you can find that. It's called On Point. Look,
arrange to be there. Book your flight.
I'm going to pause it. There we go. Probably not the best. Anyway, long and short, registrations have closed. But if you are desperate and you should be at the forum this Friday or the dinner, please feel free to get in touch with me, or obviously go to Forum on the Family. It'll be lovely to have you there. So look, lots lots that go on. Sorry, there's the button. So I've got, hard for you to imagine, my screen is not just one. Imagine about 10 or 12 little windows. So I just had to find where this one was. If you want to come to the forum, look, red stations have officially closed, but I'm sure we can find room for you. We're almost at capacity, but you know what? We're at a huge event centre. We can push a wall out. So get in touch. I'm going to leave you with what I think is a funny review by two, I think they're Australians, of the Biden-Trump debate. I found it funny, but I'll leave it to you guys to decide. I'll just put it on for you now.
2 regular club championships. To do that, you have to be quite smart, and you have to be able to hit the ball a long way. And I do it. He doesn't do it. He can't hit a ball 50 yards. He challenged me to a golf match. He can't hit a ball 50 yards. I think I'm in very good shape. I feel that I'm as in good a shape as I was 25, 30 years ago. Actually, I'm probably a little bit lighter.
Look, I'd be happy to have a driving contest with him. The reason I got my handicap, which when I was vice president, down to a 6. But by the way, I told you before, I'm happy to play golf if you carry your own bag. Think you can do it?
That's the biggest lie. He's a 6 handicap of all.
I was at 8 handicap.
Yeah.
8.
Never.
But I had, you know how many?
I've seen you swing. I know you swing.
Okay,
Let's not act like children.
President Trump, we're going to
21
turn
Let's not act like children.
You
to
are
a
a child.
specific concern.
I'm in very good.
I don't know about you, but I just found that hilarious. Partly because they're syncing, if you will, their lip syncing, and also the mannerisms, and it's near perfect. Anyway, I just thought there was a light bit of humour to end on. Thank you so much for joining me. Thank you for all the comments. There's been actually so many this morning that I'm going to go back and have to look at them, if you will, with my eyes, and not be able to talk them all through here. But guys, thanks for joining me. We'll be back next Tuesday, and I'm hoping to see a goodly number of you at the forum this Friday. But you have a wonderful Tuesday.